Good evening, Dmitry Peskov. I am honored to have you as a longtime friend on my talk show, Malard at Large. My first question will be the following one. The world order issued from 1945 under US dominance is totally obsolete after many American political and military fiascos abroad. According to Russia, how should a new acceptable world order shape up?
Well, first of all, it's my honor and my privilege to be in your program, and thank you very much for inviting me. Well, I would say that when we first met with you, it was 2001 or 2002?
2000.
Yeah, I think we could hardly imagine that something like what we have today will be happening. At that time, at the beginning of 2000, world order was pretty much different. It was a world order with based on international law, based on internationally accepted principles of international relations, and it was different environment. Now, everything seems to be broken to a great extent. International law is jeopardized to a very high extent. It is devaluated. All the principles of WTO, the majority of principles of WTO, like free trade and all that stuff, is also jeopardized. It's also jeopardized because we see numerous times attempts to politicize trade issues, trade and economic issues, to use unfair competition methods.
Yeah.
Like sanctions, like limitations and all that stuff. And well, like Russia, we have hundreds and hundreds of various sanctions upon our country, and we understand the burden pretty well. Although in principle, these kind of sanctions are totally useless because they're being implemented to make the country to change its attitude. And no one succeeded in doing that. So, and of course, in these circumstances, our country and President Putin, they insist that the only joint basis that we have is the United Nations. The United Nations, and to tackle the burning issues, the Security Council of the United Nations. This is the one and only institution that can and should be responsible for a global order, and that should be respected by all the countries in the world. We see that unfortunately, in current state of affairs, it's harder and harder for Security Council to solve problems. It's harder and harder to come to joint point of view. We see the tremendous divisions between permanent members of Security Councils. We unfortunately we cannot implement even we cannot implement the very good initiative by President Putin to have all the leaders of Permanent Five to get together and to discuss what we should do in order to repair the world.
Dmitry Peskov, I know that President Putin always considered the West and the US as responsible for the fall of the Berlin Wall and of the Soviet Empire, which explains the bad relations between Russia and the West. Would there be any chance of reconciliation?
Well, you know that President Putin sincerely believes that the collapse of the Soviet Union is one of the greatest geopolitical tragedies of the century. And of course, it was a collapse of a huge country that brought lots and lots of problems for people actually who inhabited this country, this huge country. And some consequences are still being felt in relevant countries, ex-members of the Soviet Union. Although, of course, now they are all independent and sovereign states, and no one is questioning their independence. But at the same time, there are certain integration processes developing on the territory of the ex-Soviet Union, because this is the only possible way to withstand the competition, the joint competition, and to be competitive in nowadays world.
I would like to hear from you on how do you view the aggressive approach of the US towards China and the latest political imbroglio between USA, Australia, and France?
Well, actually, we'd better not discuss relationship between the United States and China. It's better for us to discuss relationship between the United States and the Russian Federation. But definitely, well, we have to accept that the United States and China are number one and number two economic powers in the world. And then we have no doubt that despite all the difficulties, despite all the contradictions between those two powers, anyway, they will find a way not to start the mutual demolition by starting the economic war with each other. To a certain extent, the war is going on between them, but it's not our business. You know that we have great partnership with China, strategic partnership with China, and we value it very much. And unfortunately, we have quite a lousy relationship with the United States. We would like to repair it.
Talking about US-Russian relationship, Dmitry Peskov, it happens, I will remember that the time, it was a few months ago when US President Joe Biden dared treating President Putin as a killer. How can it be received?
Well, let's say, I think we have managed to turn down this page, in our relationship. I don't think it was a successful statement. So anyway, what was due to be discussed was discussed in that respect, and let's consider it done. What is important now is to somehow to keep alive the atmosphere of Geneva summit between two leaders. If we manage to keep it alive, if we manage to stick to implementation of those agreements and understandings that were reached during the summit, then we have a very slight chance to revive our relationship for the sake of our two people of our countries, and for the sake of global security and stability. Now, American and Russian experts have launched the consultations on strategic stability and arms control, and it should be appreciated. It's a very good development, but we're not that fast in implementing the other articles of the agenda.
Could you tell us, Dmitry, why are the relations between European Union and Russia so bad? Is it because of a lack of trust and European fears of Russian interferences?
Relations between Moscow and then Brussels are so bad because Brussels has taken a decision to freeze down those relationships. The answer is very simple. Russia is seeking partnership relations because Europe is the main economic partner and trade partner for our country. And we're seeking good relationship with each member in European Union as a whole. But unfortunately, all the dimensions of our dialogue, all the pillars of our dialogue with the EU have been frozen, and still we don't see any reciprocity coming from Brussels in terms of restarting the dialogue. Unfortunately, although we have lots and lots of questions on the agenda, we have lots of joint challenges, we have lots of problems, common problems for our European continent to be tackled, and it should be tackled together.
I talked to one of your neighbors. Turkish President Recep Erdogan is seen by many observers as a troubleshooter in Eastern Mediterranean, in NATO, having, and you probably are going to laugh on that, one foot in and one foot in Russian courtyard. And also, for President Putin, it might be a problem when he supports Islamist groups against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, who is his ally. How can you cope with that?
Well, we have our very close relationship with Turkey. Turkey is a very good trade and economic partner for us. And despite some differences, sometimes crucial differences in approach towards global and regional problems, at the same time, we have mutual benefits. We had quite a complicated situation in various regions, for example, in Syria. But even despite that complications, our two presidents, they performed an unbelievable political will to reach an understanding and to show necessary flexibility so we can cooperate in this very, very responsible situation like we have in Syria. So we are cooperating.
Dmitry, how would you qualify today the relationship between Russia and Israel? It seems there were better understanding between President Putin and former Prime Minister Netanyahu when Russia tolerated the bombings by Israel of Iranian and Hezbollah targets on the Syrian ground. Why such a change of attitude today, it seems?
Well, I wouldn't speak about any change in attitude today. We actually, yes, we have quite a developed relationship with Israel. It's a very good relationship, and we have even cooperation and dialogue in a very sensitive spheres, like security, like defense. Our defense people, they are in permanent dialogue. So it's very good. Well, try not to compare Mr. Netanyahu and current prime minister, because Putin used to work with Mr. Netanyahu for lots and lots of years.
Long time,
so
yeah.
They knew each other, quite a long time. So they knew each other pretty well. So it takes time for establishing new personal relationship. We respect Israel's concerns about its own security. We do respect it. But at the same time, we have our own relationship with all the countries in the region.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to develop it as well.
Dmitry, Israel says it won't tolerate the Iranian nuclear bomb, which might be ready in 2 to 3 months. Will you stand for Iran to get the bomb, or will you try to prevent Iran to get it, maybe preventing at the same time a potential regional conflict, knowing also that the USA are out of the loop in the area?
Tremendous efforts are being spent right now to bring things back to order in joint comprehensive plan on Iran. Of course, everyone is standing for non-proliferation, and everyone that is inside of the deal. No one would want Iran to be a nuclear state in terms of nuclear weapons. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that Iran has a right for peaceful nuclear energy. And this is the essence of the deal. And now we're working to get back on track the participation of the United States. You know that very, very complicated consultations are underway. We don't have the final.
What will you do? What will Russia do if Israel decides for any reason to intervene militarily on its own?
I would prefer not to answer this question. I would prefer not to speak about apocalyptical scenarios of the development of the situation.
I go back to Afghanistan now, Dmitry, if you want. 32 years after the Soviet troops' withdrawal from Afghanistan, 21 years after the US withdrawal and the British before. What lesson do you draw from these military fiascos in Afghanistan?
The lesson is obvious. And as an ex-Soviet Union, we understood it pretty well. We had quite a tragic experience in Afghanistan, and we will never forget it. We lost lots of lives of Soviet soldiers at that time, and we don't want it to be repeated. The lesson is very obvious, and it's very simple. We should stop thinking about trying to teach other countries how to live. And we should stop thinking that the way of living of certain countries is incorrect in our understanding, and that we should teach them how to build their future. Every nation should take their decision how to do it. But at the same time, we have to be very responsible about the potential threat of terror. And in this sense, we're all keen to see what will be the steps of Taliban in terms of preventing terrorist groups of infiltrating the territory of Afghanistan and creating a cradle in the territory of Afghanistan. This is something that we will never want to see again.
Yeah.
And this is something that constitutes a direct threat for our country, because we are a member of a single space with Tajikistan, for example, that has the very long border with Afghanistan, and then the potential threat of terrorist groups coming from Afghanistan will also be a major concern for us.
Dmitry, in October 2000, long time ago, when President Putin granted me, thanks to you, my very first interview, Russia was fighting the Chechen rebels in Caucasia. And President Putin told me, I cannot allow Islamist groups to install Islamic Republic in my Caucasian backyard. What would you say today with the Taliban, Islamist, back to power at your frontiers and at the frontiers of your former Soviet Caucasian republics?
Yes, it's a great concern for us. And of course, we will expect effective measures, effective steps taken against terrorists on the territory of Afghanistan, and taken against drug traffickers and opium traffickers from the territory of Afghanistan, because we know that the majority of this deadly opium is coming from Afghanistan, is going to the Russian Federation and then to European countries.
Could we imagine Russia, the US, and the Taliban siding together against your number one common enemy in Afghanistan? I mean, the Islamic State.
Islamic State is not a native part of multinational Afghanistan society. So they are foreigners. They are foreigners in Afghanistan. And now territory of Afghanistan is under control of Taliban. So in our understanding, Taliban should take these effective measures in order to prevent creation of Islamic State there, meaning the terroristic organization Islamic State.
Don't you think that the West, which is according to me too weak, facing Islamist terrorism, should align on President Putin's formula? I quote, "We need to terrorize the terrorists to the toilets."
Well, he said that formula in when we had really strategic events on our Caucasus, when we had an unbelievable war with international terror in our country. At that time, we were heavily criticized by our European colleagues for violating human rights and so on and so forth. So we were violating human rights of international terrorists. Of course, we would never agree with such statements. And then President Putin was tough enough to win this war. And now we have peace, stability, and prosperity in our Caucasus.
As long as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not solved, is there, according to President Putin, to Russia, a risk of regional conflict?
You mean Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a long-standing problem, regional problem that we all face, and there is still quite a long road to be passed until we find the way out. So again, in our understanding, the main principle is the efforts that are being taken within the auspices of the United Nations, and we do hope that these efforts, the quartet, will continue its contacts and its efforts to facilitate the deal on the Middle East.
Dmitry, without flattering President Putin, I always considered him as the best chess player of the world governance. Can you explain to me how he can be, at the same time, a friend of Israel, of Iran, of Syria, China, which are rivals in certain way to Israel?
Well, President Putin is a very pragmatic He's a very pragmatic chess player. So, and then he's trying to build good relationship with all the countries in the world. Of course, it needs reciprocity. It needs reciprocal efforts. We are good on track with some countries, and unfortunately, we don't see reciprocity with the others. But we do hope that, with the time being, we'll be able to restore our dialogue with the European Union, with the United States, some other countries.
Last question, Dmitry. Amidst this crazy, unpredictable world, what would be the message President Putin would like to address to the world?
Well, 2 years ago, President Putin was on GA in New York, and he delivered a speech. Actually, I would recommend you to read this speech on Kremlin website. It's kremlin.ru. And he was quite bold in his speech, trying to say that we have too many problems and too many challenges, and the critical amount of the conflict potential and the problems, the existential problems such as climate change, they're getting more and more, and we need to be together to solve these problems, to tackle these problems. If we stay divided, then we'll have no chance.
Well, I would have expecting more optimistic views. But Dmitry, once more, I want to thank you very much for your trust and long-time friendship.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And bye-bye.